Hello, good morning, and welcome to this Logistics Manager webinar sponsored by Lucas Systems. I'm James McLaughlin, Editor of Logistics Manager, and your host for today's session, which is titled Plug in and Optimize Smarter Picking, Packing, and Shipping. In today's fast-paced fulfillment world, efficiency, accuracy, and flexibility are critical. In this exclusive webinar, I'll be joined by experts from Lucas Systems, its partner Perseus, and its customer Medusa Distribution to explore how dynamic solutions are transforming picking, packing, and shipping. You'll hear about how advanced cartonisation engines, digital twins, and real-time data can drive smarter picking paths, adaptive strategies, and right-fit packing automatically and in real time. You'll also see how these tools integrate seamlessly with existing systems and hear how Medusa increased productivity and customer satisfaction while lowering operational costs through real-time optimization. To learn more about this, I'm joined today by Rick Day, Client Director at Lucas Systems, and we will also be hearing from Andrew Hayner, Chief Operations Officer at Medusa Distribution, and Thomas David Yee, founder of Perseus. Over the course of this webinar, you'll hear how real-time cartonisation, driven by 3D cartonisation engines, can automatically create optimal packing and shipping plans, minimizing waste and maximizing delivery success. At this point, I'd just like to encourage viewers to ask questions throughout the presentation via the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. Please remember to submit your name, job title, and company name when doing so. I'll pose as many of these questions as possible to Rick, Andrew, and Thomas in the time available following the presentation. Also, a recording of this webinar will soon be made available to view on demand via logisticsmanager.com, so look out for that. And with that, I'll now hand over to Rick to start the presentation section of this webinar.
Thanks very much, James. Maz, if you would be kind enough to flip onto the next slide for us. Good morning, everybody. Welcome. Thank you for attending today's webinar. I'm Rick Day, a client director with Lucas Systems. My background is that I've been doing stuff with software for about 30 years now. And the last 15 years of that really how we apply data to different challenges in retail supply chain to better leverage data for better outcomes. So I work for Lucas Systems. For those of you that are unfamiliar with Lucas, we're a software company. We're a 28-year-old software company who purely specialize in optimizing different processes within the warehouse or within the distribution center. We're widely deployed in about 450 different locations, and despite being a 28-year-old business, we're constantly striving for innovation. And I guess that's the theme of today's webinar, guys. We're really going to show you sort of a very innovative example of a deployment that's gone live this year that involves technology from ourselves, from Perseus, implemented into a company called Medusa Distribution. And to that end, I'd like to welcome along my fellow panelists today. So Andrew Hayner, who is the Chief Operations Officer of Medusa. Medusa are a large volume distribution business of vaping equipment located in the US. And I'm also really delighted to be joined by Thomas David Yee, who is the founder of Perseus, and they are a Lucas partner who provide advanced cartonisation technologies. So today's going to be all about a customer story, a really innovative approach to pick, pack and ship operations, and that joint solution that leverages the very best of what Lucas can bring, but also our partner Perseus, and seeing those two technologies working in harmony. Next slide, please, Maz. So in terms of some of this morning's learning objectives, so Lucas as a business, typically we help organizations with two different things. So we help organizations with more throughput through their facility, and we help with more pick accuracy. And what you're going to learn from today's session directly from Andrew Hayner is how Medusa have helped to really drive their throughput and increase productivity through their operation by implementing these technologies. In addition to that, you'll see how they've really leveraged this, what I think is a real step change and game-changing technology around the use of real-time cartonisation within the operation, and really how then these two best-of-breed technologies have come together to leverage that best-of-breed cartonisation, but coupling that with some really cool technology that Lucas Systems have around smart batching together of orders and smart pick path optimization that really delivers that step change in operational benefit. So you're going to get that story today and learn a lot of these details as to what's to happen. Thank you, Maz. Next slide, please. But just to give a little bit of context to today, so what have we seen in the last few years? I think we've seen that supply chains are really uncertain. So, lots of things have happened that I don't think anybody necessarily foresaw. Things like, a pandemic, things like serious labor shortages and serious increases in cost bases into operational facilities, whether that be from direct labor costs or, for example, new taxation, so national insurance increases. So lots of things happen that are beyond control that maybe we can't predict. But what we do believe is you can have an adaptable set of software that enables you to adapt to these things. And that's the importance of really having a dynamic environment whereby you can adapt to different things that change because they just happen and you're going to need to be able to adapt to those. Next slide, please, Maz. Within the space, within the warehouse space, it's a really confusing time. There's lots of different technologies out there. There's lots of different choices for you. At Lucas Systems, historically, we were a voice company, a voice optimization company. Now we're really using that smart data to make real-time smart decision making to really optimize people, but also optimize some automation technologies as well. And different companies will of course adapt to different technologies and adopt different technologies dependent upon their own objectives. And maybe those objectives are linked to returns on investment, for example. So it might be you're looking for a really quick ROI, in which case maybe optimizing people might be suitable, or maybe you're playing a longer game and looking at something like an ASRS investment that maybe has a slightly longer time to value. But there's lots and lots of choices out there. So Maz, if you could just pop me to the next slide, please. But critically, what we believe is that having what we call the dynamic warehouse is absolutely critical to helping you to deal with this uncertainty. So a dynamic warehouse really is a bolt-on to that traditional static warehouse management system that releases data in waves throughout the day. And what Lucas does, and what the Lucas Dynamic Warehouse does, is it bolts onto that. And it enables real-time data-driven decision making. So it's leveraging that rich insight that you have within the warehouse management system. But it's also then adding information and insights to that so that at any given time, we're going to make real-time decisioning. And because that's real-time and because we're constantly taking in real-time data feeds, we can adjust to different situations by having a dynamic warehouse rather than having more of a static environment. Anyway, today's not all about Lucas Systems. It's absolutely about this fabulous deployment, and it's my absolute pleasure now to hand you over to Andrew Hayner, who is the Chief Operations Officer over at Medusa, and also to Thomas, a very highly valued Lucas partner over at Perseus. And these guys are going to walk you through the deployment that's been made at Medusa that incorporates both the Lucas and the Perseus technologies. So good morning, Andrew. I know it's very early for you over there. Thank you for getting up early to join us. We really appreciate you making the time for us.
Our pleasure, Rick. Our pleasure. Good morning, good afternoon, depending, I guess, where you are. My name's Andrew Hayner. I'm an industrial engineer by trade, so I've been in process improvement for almost 20 years. I've been with Medusa for 7 years. I came in 2018 as a consultant, and I've been full-time since 2019, running operations, launching a WMS. We started on paper. When I got there, we had no inventory system, and now we're picking with an AI-driven tool that's with a headset. We didn't even have RFs when I got there. So big changes over the last 6 years. But Rick, I wanted to just mention on something that you had mentioned earlier in the slides about all the options that you have. And our business is B2B. It's very large orders. Our orders are over 100 units per order. I think it's like 17 lines average. So, across most orders are so very large and most often or not, people come in, oh, you want to do automation, you want to do this and that and next thing. And it's just not an option for somebody with orders our size. Um, so the challenge here was that the bullets here are on the slide, right? So we had manual errors in picking. We had a lot of tribal knowledge on what goes in what box, and you're relying on an hourly employee to make those decisions. Our WMS is good, but it's not, and I love our WMS. I don't want, they're probably going to watch this video and think that I'm, bad talking to them, but it's just not a picking. They're just not great at picking, right? And we have a lot of rules in our industry on what can go with what. And that led to really having high shipping and labor costs. We have to ship with a specific carrier, U.S. Postal Service, and they're not cheap, right? So how do we, as a process improvement leader and somebody that's always trying to eliminate waste, how do we navigate that, right? So I was looking for a solution where we could reduce touches, reduce this tribal knowledge, and that scales, right? So, Maz, you can bless us with the next slide, please. So, this whole journey came actually in 2020. Our WMS has a cartonization app. They have a pick to carton app, but like again, as I mentioned, it just wasn't powerful enough to handle kind of the. First of all, our orders are about six boxes per order, right? So it's a lot of boxes. And we're shipping on average about 27-pound boxes, 12, like, so 1 cubic foot. So we abandoned the whole pick to carton thing because it just wasn't working. And we just went back to picking to a tote, picking to a cart, and then breaking those orders out at a pack station, maybe into 5-6 boxes. When I met Thomas and we started talking about the ability to do on-the-fly cartonization, it kind of reintroduced the option to pick to carton again. So my dream kind of came back, right? So what we were able to do was Thomas was able to take our order, look at it organically, and figure out what the box arrangement should be. That's great, but how do we execute that real time in the warehouse, right? Without spending a ton of money on lights or other automation that could probably deliver on that. And then enters Lucas, right? So not only were we able to partner with Thomas and have his cartonization logic tell us how we should be picking and what we should be doing, but we can pair that with the headset, go hands free, and make it really invisible to our picker, right? And now our pickers become packers, right? So we're actually picking direct into the carton as we pick, right? So we're picking and packing, eliminating an entire touch, right? So Maz, next slide. So Thomas can hop in here as well. So Thomas and I had started honing the algorithm, I don't know, 2 years ago at this point. And then at the pack station, right? So that, I guess, with the diagnostic there, that was where we started. We started really with the cartonization algorithm. We started breaking things out from the tote. Thomas was able to tell us from each tote, how do we pack it? What types of boxes should we use? And Thomas, if you want to explain how a little bit about
Yes.
that and the game theory.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Thank you for setting the context up, Andrew, and thank you for hosting this webinar, Rick and Lucas and everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. Hi, I'm Thomas. I'm the founder of Perseus. And yeah, before Perseus, I was 5 years at Amazon writing software for Amazon's supply chain. And then, yeah, a couple of years ago, I left because I had this feeling that the supply chain outside of Amazon needs me more than Amazon. And yeah, pretty quickly after I left, I met Andrew and we started talking cartonization. and how to pack boxes. And pretty quickly after I met Andrew, I realized that this is a serious problem, and it's a very complicated problem, and it's one of those problems where the WMS will always encounter it at some point. So a WMS is always going to have some kind of a cartonization, and by cartonization I mean some sort of a decision engine that decides, okay, given contents of an order and dimensions of items in an order, how do you put items into boxes, right? And this is just a very natural question that, like, in a warehouse setting is going to be asked by people doing the work. And so generally a WMS is going to have a cartonization, but there's a cartonization, there's one level of cartonization and there's different levels of cartonization. And I think, cartonization is never going to be like Andrew said, they have actually a really good WMS, that they're really good at certain things, but cartonization is never like the top priority for WMS. So they generally have some sort of a rudimentary liquid fill logic where you kind of look at the volumes of the items, and based on the volumes of the items, you try to fit the items as water into the boxes, and like sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, right? And generally it only looks at volumes. It doesn't look at what happens after the packing decision, right? Like, how is that actually shipped? Is the price of the shipping label, could it have been influenced, reduced by packing things differently? And so these are the questions that Andrew asked me, yeah, 2 years ago when we met, and uh, the um, the answer is yeah. Like you can model out and you can simulate an order in detail. Like, if you know the dimensions and weights of items, and if you know how what are the carrier contracts, right? Andrew's using the American Postal Service. He's using FedEx. But Andrew also has a complicated situation where certain items cannot be shipped with certain ship methods. FedEx doesn't, for whatever reason, doesn't want to carry certain items. So Andrew has these constraints on this tribal knowledge on what can be put where and what can be packed how, and these are extra sort of equations into the cartonization decision engine that you need to have if you really want the solution to be usable by someone like Andrew. And so
So,
that's why Perseus exists, because this cartonization is a problem that most customers of warehouse management systems are going to have, but the WMS is generally, it's never going to be a priority number one for WMS to have a strong cartonization generally. So Perseus is here. Like, all we do is cartonization all day, every day, and we have a sophisticated engine for that. And
so, so Thomas, we were able to work with our WMS. We created a bolt-on almost to our WMS, and we were able to, but we still weren't picking orders. We were picking splits that the WMS was splitting our orders into, right? So I knew there was a better way, and so did Thomas. So we knew that if we looked at it at the order level versus, like, because we were basically we were splitting our orders in the WMS to pick the things that can ship with one carrier in one tote and one carrier in another tote. So we were, most orders would kind of generate two different totes, and then so that naturally you're losing some sort of advantage there with shipping, with not having everything in front of you. So that enters, I think, Lucas, knowing that we could do this on the order level. So on a high level, our order comes in to our WMS. It hits Thomas's API. He optimizes it, and then Lucas, when we go to wave it and pick it through Lucas, Lucas reaches out to Thomas and says, "How do we pick this? How many different boxes? What does it go in?" We were actually able to add a lot of really cool things. So we put our no-fly stickers on the boxes. Thomas is telling us to put the hazmat stickers on boxes. So So Lucas enters the chat around March of 2024, and we go live almost a year later in this past March. So, and the full rollout was, I mean, we're fully picking. I mean, we're like 95% picking on Lucas. The only things that don't pick on Lucas are orders that are not optimized because of something really large on the order, like I don't know, like a display unit or something very large that fails the optimizer. Those are the only things that are left picking. So, did I miss anything there, Thomas?
No, I think that's accurate. The main benefit I think of this whole combo of like picking is that it enabled Medusa to go back from picking uh to tote to then sort the tote into boxes to like
Right.
pick directly to boxes. And,
Right.
and I think what's really magical about the solution here is that essentially there's two critical steps there. It's the decision about what goes where, and then also the implementation of that decision, the actual picking needs to be smooth, needs to be fast. And so I think what we've learned once we roll this out is that yeah, actually the cartonization decision is good, but also the picking, which you would think would be picking directly to carton would be slightly harder and would take slightly longer than picking directly to tote, right? Because there's no sorting step. But turns out that that's not the case, right? Because Lucas has certain, picking with a voice, is faster and easier than picking with a scanner. So
Right.
that was a
Well, and one thing to mention, Rick, is our products are like they're the size of either iPhone boxes or cell phone boxes. Those are the devices, or things like the size of vitamins, right? So we have very small, I would small-ish items that are light, but somebody's going to order 10 of them, right? So they're going to order 10 of each flavor, 10 of each variant. So yeah, being hands free is huge, right? So Matt's next slide, we'll go through the stats here. So I wanted to touch on obviously the productivity increases, and then Thomas I think can touch on the shipping cost reduction, which I think we glossed over a little bit. I think we should kind of spend a little bit of time talking about what that is, Thomas. But so we've actually seen on all pickers while picking into the carton, because of being hands-free and using Lucas and the dynamic work optimization and all these other things that come with Lucas, an increase in over 13.6, almost 14% in UPH across all pickers. Now remember, that's when we're actually picking and packing it as we go, right? And we've seen an increase of about 15 tasks per hour. So pick faces are being visited at a rate of 15% more per hour, which is also huge because again, you're picking and packing the order on your cart. So that's across all pickers. We have another slide that's after this that will show a little bit more detail on that. But Thomas, I think you should talk a little bit about how we've saved money. We've also, so not only we saved money on labor and all those other measurements and errors and stuff like that, but the amount of money we've saved in shipping by doing nothing, right? We haven't spent money to save money, right? Maybe you can explain a little bit about that.
yes. So that 16% comes from um, having an engine to play a game with the carriers, right? So because especially like in the US, Medusa ships all over the US. There's a couple of carriers that deliver across the US. They give you these when you sign a contract with them, they give you these rate cards. And it's like depending on the distance, there's like 8 zones, and depending on the weight, there's these are the costs, right? And it's like a lot. It's a big matrix, right? Different every ship method, there's a different matrix. There's extra fees for certain things, for certain boxes, um, there's fuel surcharges. So there's a bunch of these little variables that kind of influence the cost. And the carrier, sometimes not even the rep understands fully exactly which variable in your contract influences the cost. But Perseus does, right? So like when we onboarded Medusa onto Perseus, we took those carrier rates, for their FedEx account, their USPS account, and then um, whenever an order drops in to Perseus, we know exactly where it's going. We know the origin zip code, that's Medusa. We know where it's going. Is it going to California? Is it going to Florida? And then we can run a bunch of simulations, right? And we can simulate, okay, everything fits into these two big boxes, right? What if we ship both of them USPS? What if we ship one FedEx and one USPS? What if we split them into two smaller instead of two big boxes, four smaller boxes, or six tiny boxes, or maybe one big one and three small ones, right? And all these scenarios we can simulate, and then we decide the option that doesn't minimize volume, but minimizes the actual fulfillment costs, right? Because sometimes, and this could be counterintuitive, but it does happen, depending on your specific rate cards, sending two smaller boxes is cheaper than one big box, right? And knowing when, it really depends on like specifics, right? What are the items, how heavy the order is. And so, for humans, it's very hard to make an accurate decision on this every time, right? Because there's not really consistent high level rule. It just kind of depends on like what the rates are and what the items are and the destination is. But a machine can do it very quickly, right? So like as soon as an order drops in, we immediately know what the cheapest configuration is for the shipping, and then we just send over those results to Lucas, and then Lucas guides the pickers. Okay, it's gonna be three boxes, and one is USPS, two of them are FedEx. The USPS one has a no-fly sticker, and then the Jennifer, the Lucas robot, guides the picker very seamlessly in building the cart and then placing items into the cart. And so that's where the 16% is from. By like sometimes you send a big box, sometimes you send two or three smaller boxes. And that's where, compared to what Medusa used to do, they just pretty much put everything in like a 12 by 12 by 12 box. Compared to that, we're 16% more cost efficient on USPS and FedEx.
Right. Exactly. And we're also seeing it's easier to onboard employees now, right? Less tribal knowledge. Thomas took all the tribal knowledge out, right? So when he optimizes the order, he's telling us, okay, put like items together, don't put that with this, it's breakable, da 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 da, right? So that lent itself to something along the lines of 30% of
There's also this nice little synergy with Lucas as well. There's nice that some of those packing rules, like advanced packing rules, like this thing has a glassy, fragile item. It needs extra bubble, right? There's a way for Perseus. So first of all, Perseus knows that rule. So Perseus know we need extra bubble in that box because it has a glass item. But Perseus also has an interface with Lucas that it can like tag that box. This box need it's an extra packing instruction, and then that instruction is passed on to Lucas. So then when the boxer is making the box, Jennifer's telling him, "Hey, don't forget to put extra bubble wrap on that box." And
right.
and this is something that now we don't have to train anyone, right? We don't have to tell the people, "Hey, glass item means bubble," right? It's the robot is going to tell him every time.
Right. Maz, you want to go with the next slide? So this I kind of alluded to this on the last slide, but so we looked at our experience pickers before and after, and we saw an even bigger improvement, right? So the people that hustled even before we on our on our RF guns, we're seeing even bigger ones. So 20% on UPH and almost 23% on tasks, right? So again, that's when with picking straight to carton, and then these boxes don't need to be packed, right? So um, there's at this moment like 80 to 85% of the boxes are going straight out the door now versus going from a tote to a pack station to being packed in boxes. So now a box that might take 15 minutes to pack is now taking 1 to 3 minutes, and then just goes right out the door. So we're seeing a drastic increase in productivity. We're able to turn, and this is on the next slide too. So Maz, if you want to go to the next slide. So we're seeing a huge, savings in labor. We're seeing obviously we're seeing the eliminated waste with not packing air, but I think one of the biggest advantages is that we're actually able to turn these orders very quickly, right? So they're huge orders. They come in all throughout the day, and we're able to get them mostly out, depending on what time they come in the same day, which is big for our business. We consider ourselves a subscription-based business because customers are consistently ordering the same things, and we have a very sticky customer base that's typically ordering every week, the same day of the week, and replenishing their stores, right? So to be able to get those orders out 22% faster picking, and then 3 minutes versus 15 minutes to box it, or to put the label on it. And again, these are things that we can start to bolt on more automation, and we plan on doing that. But with the print and apply or all these other things that you can talk about, that would even take that down to nothing, right? So, and then Thomas, I think if you wanted to talk about we talked about the whole confident packer part, but if you wanted to explain the tribal knowledge stuff, eliminating that and making everybody understand.
Yeah, though, so because that's actually a big it's a big softer benefit. It's a little bit harder to measure than like savings in shipping or savings in labor. For those the formulas are pretty clear. This is what we used to spend. This is what we're spending now. The difference is kind of like, okay, that's the ROI. But what we've seen is a reduction in mistakes and just the confidence of the management to like take a person and plug them into picking has increased. The bottleneck I remember, Andrew, in your warehouse was picking, even with the RF was always when you were picking to totes or picking to carts the onboarding wasn't that bad there either, but where the bottleneck was packing, right? Because you had a bunch of rules that needed to be followed, right? And sometimes those rules are, if they're broken, it's not such a big deal. Maybe a glass item breaks if it's not bubbled correctly. Then customer complains and you guys send them a new item. And that's suboptimal, but definitely, not the end of the world. But some of these carrier restrictions, you send an item with a carrier that's not supposed to be sent, right? And the carrier catches it. Now that could be a big problem. That can lead to, audits. That could lead to even account suspensions. And that is problematic. So making sure packers are confident that they're doing the right thing all the time. That's huge. That's huge. And so, in the past, I remember, the training that a packer would need to go through before the management was confident in them. Oh, they're actually gonna like pack everything correctly. We don't need to double check everything they're doing. Now that time has been reduced significantly. Right now, that decision making is moved to picking, right? But the picker has Jennifer hand holding him all the way. They don't have to think about, okay, this is the fragile item, we need extra bubble wrap. oh, this is a battery. I got to make sure, it doesn't have a FedEx sticker or whatever, right? All of these decisions are already made, and the instructions are there. So it is huge.
And I think it scales really well. So I think one of the things that really is great about the whole solution is that if we wanted to um, duplicate this somewhere else, right, on the west coast of the country, middle of the country, whatever, it's pretty straightforward. Can kind of just turn it on, and versus my lord, back in the day, if we had to train everybody, on the idiosyncrasies of how what goes in what box, I mean, it would take a lot longer, right? So I think I mentioned it earlier in the discussion about scalability, but I mean, this really scales. This allows us to scale, allows us to grow. We haven't even applied Jennifer to other areas of the warehouse, like receiving, cycle counting, put away. We just getting started with Lucas, and we're seeing this much of an increase in productivity. So we're pretty excited about what's to become. And again, these numbers are through mid-June. And again, we're getting better and more proficient on the system as we go. So I'm excited to see where we finish at the end of the year. So Rick, maybe turn it back over to you.
Sure thing, Maz. Maybe you could pop over to the next slide for us. Thank you very much. So, guys, look, first of all, for me, congratulations. That's a really transformational journey you've been on. A fabulous solution that you've come up with. You've taken two best of breed technologies, Andrew, and put them together and come up with a world-beating, solution. It's absolutely brilliant. Well done, Andrew. To have that vision, to be picking directly into the carton, to be eliminating a key bottleneck within your process to get more throughput. It's really smart. Thomas, the carriers must hate you. To have that cheat code, right? To be able to negotiate with the carriers, and they don't even know you're doing it. To get those lower, costs of carriage is fabulous to have. So a fabulous solution, guys. Earlier in the presentation, I referenced the dynamic warehouse from Lucas Systems, that adaptable environment. We do have a white paper on that, and there's a little link there for that. If anybody wants to go and download that white paper, please feel free to do that after today's session. And now we'd be delighted to take any questions. I'll pass back to you, James.
Brilliant. Well, thank you guys for that excellent presentation. That leads us nicely into the interactive Q&A section of the webinar. So for our viewers, now's the time to submit your questions if you haven't done so already. The first question we've got here is asking if you could explain a little bit more, maybe this is for you, Rick and Tom, about how the Perseus and Lucas Systems integration works behind the scenes, and at what point the WS might be called in.
Yeah. So I think we touched upon it a little bit, but I'll dove a little bit deeper. So in our drops in, Medusa has its own proprietary website where customers order. So the order drops in directly from the website to the WMS. Perseus listens to new orders in a WMS. There's a certain flag on, like, once an order is ready to be processed in the warehouse, once the credit card transaction is okayed and everything, then Perseus takes over. We pull in the contents, we pull in the dimensions, all the data, the rules, the constraints, carrier rates, crunch the numbers, and then we, very quickly after the order comes in, it's already optimized, and then we store the optimization solution. Right now, orders come in, they get optimized by Perseus, and they're waiting to be waived. At Medusa, it's not automatically waived. They have certain reasons. Maybe Andrew can talk about why, but they generally wait for like a bulk chunk of work to be ready to be released, and then they waive the orders from the WMS to Lucas. Once those orders hit Lucas does their magic, and as they're doing their magic, they call Perseus via an API and an HTTP API, where for an order ID, they ask us, what are the cartons? Perseus gives the cartons, the ship methods, the labels, the UN label, the battery label, the no-fly sticker label, the extra bubble, all these instructions together with which item goes into which box and what size the box is. And then Lucas takes that information, joins it with the their engine for like the routing and the dynamic work optimization, and then Jennifer takes over and handholds the picker through the picking process.
Brilliant. And is the total shipping cost taken into consideration when making the cartonisation decision?
Yes, yes, exactly. So it's slightly, like a natural question could be, is this different than like rate shopping, right? Because a lot of systems, WMSs have rate shopping. If you give me a box, uh, if you give me a box that has certain dimension and a certain weight, I have a set of carriers. I can ask each of those carriers. Um, how much to ship it, right? And then I can take the cheapest one, right? And that's cool. So Perseus does that, but it does it early in the process, right? What rate shopping doesn't tell you is that, this box that you're shipping could have actually been split into two smaller boxes and and then rate shopped separately. And so Perseus does that. We're able to we know that as we're placing items, as we're simulating the placement of items into different boxes of different sizes, we're also simulating what if this box was sent with USPS? What if it was sent with, FedEx? What would the difference be? And so yeah, the answer is yes.
Great. The next question we've got here says, do these dynamic solutions have optimal unit or order throughput volumes, hourly, daily, monthly, or is there a small or large operation size limitation where the solution is impractical?
Um, I think from the Perseus side, um, the we haven't reached a limit to like when, having cartonization is always better than not having cartonization. Like on average, a machine's gonna make a better decision than a packer. But then there's certain scenarios where the value add of cartonization is gonna be better than the packer significantly. And then there's scenarios where it's gonna be, not that big of a value add. So for example, if you're a 3PL and all you do is, put and one t-shirt into a mailer, and that's, most of your order volume. Turns out packers don't really need help with that decision, right? Like they can make that decision confidently every time, and you don't need a cartonization engine to help with that, right? So, these direct to consumer, small light item packing operations, cartonization, not the biggest, most urgent thing in the world. If you're if you're someone like Andrew and you're shipping, B2B wholesale, or you're a retail, right? And you're dealing with like retail compliance, you have rules about how certain things need to be, packed, shipped, bubble wrapped. That's where, when you're shipping 20, 30 units in a box, and those boxes are 20, 30, 40, 50 pounds. You're building pallets, right? Building pallets, those are heavy. Packing decisions need to be accurate, because changing how it should be packed or built is expensive. It takes work. So those are scenarios where cartonization adds significantly more value than just winging it. But yeah, a lot of like the D2C 1, 2, 3 small units in one small box, generally not super necessary. It still adds a little bit, but it's, you can generally help with right sizing of the cartons, but not the biggest ROI item.
And another question for you, Thomas. How much trial and error did you go through as you developed the packing algorithm?
A lot. Oh. So there were a couple of learnings there that I went through. I think the number one unexpected one. And in hindsight, it's kind of like, oh, how did I not expect this? But a little bit of context. Before Amazon, I was a theoretical mathematician, right? And so all I cared about was algorithms and like math and equations. And I was always when I was younger, I was of the opinion of like, you need to have a perfect theoretical solution, and then you build a practical system once you have the theory figured out, right? And so when we started, prototyping this for Medusa, I was working on that perfect algorithm, right? And then, I got a pretty good algorithm, but then I realized, and that was before Lucas came into the picture, that um, before, even if you have the best algorithm, best cartonization algorithm in the world, at some point, a person or a robot, but at Medusa, it was a person, needs to actually do the physical work. And that person needs to get the very clear instructions from the system, right? But like communicating clearly to the packer wasn't really a priority at that time. It was just optimizing the algorithm to like satisfy metrics, right? And then I started actually prototyping with real packers doing work based on what the cartonization output says. I realized, oh wow, like um, if I don't make this easy to use by packers, there's gonna be no savings. and uh, and so that's and that's where like Lucas came in, and we when we were optimizing just totes at Medusa, we hacked together some solutions that made it usable sorta by packers, right? But that's when, the super heavy lift that Lucas came in and just took off our plate was like, we have this amazing system called Jennifer. And whatever Perseus decides needs to happen, Jennifer has a very smooth way of articulating to the packer, and that was just and that was huge for us. So yeah, so I think long story short, the biggest learning is, even if with the best algorithm, if the packer doesn't understand, if the worker doesn't understand it's there's going to be no savings.
Perfect. And we have time for just one last question. So William Harper here asks, what happens if there's no stock of an item and the cartons are incorrect as a result?
So I can take that one. We actually there's options in Jennifer, right? So you just tell Jennifer that the slot is empty, and then the order doesn't get that box for that order doesn't get released until it's resolved by somebody in the supervisor role. So either we short the line, we don't do back orders, so we don't sell things we don't have. Um, so we just short the line and refund the customer. So the carton wouldn't go out incorrect. Everything would be corrected, and the pack slip reflecting that properly.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. So that brings us to the end of today's webinar. I'd like to thank Rick Day, Client Director at Lucas Systems, Andrew Hayner, Chief Operations Officer at Medusa Distribution, and Thomas David Yee, founder of Perseus, for joining us this morning. I'd also like to thank Lucas Systems for sponsoring today's webinar, which will be available to view on demand soon via logisticsmanager.com, in case you'd like to refer back to the presentation or share it with a colleague. So that's it. We've reached the end of this webinar. Thank you all for attending today's session. I hope to see you all again in a few weeks for our next Logistics Manager webinar entitled Small Systems for Big Impact, How Entry-Level Automation Can Improve Your Operations. Keep an eye out on logisticsmanager.com for more information on this webinar this afternoon. Goodbye.